Reddit, tell me your glitch in the Matrix stories. I'm talking weird occurrences, coincidences you haven't been able to easily explain. I'll start. We have a breakfast late on at work every morning, just a simple buffet of eggs, bacon, what have you. Nothing huge, and it's really only to feed about a dozen people or so. I am usually one of the first guys from my team to get to work, and the kitchen was deserted as usual. I walked into the little kitchen. There was a ceramic egg tray thing with 12 eggs in it, like the bottom half of an egg carton with a socket for each egg. All spaces are filled with warm, freshly boiled eggs. I take one, walk over to the garbage bin, shuck the shell, then I walk back over to the food and stop dead. There are 12 eggs in the tray again. No one entered the room while I was peeling the thing. I touched the mystery egg, it was the same temp as the other eggs around it. Not a big thing, nothing major, but something very strange. Given one does not get presented with strange eggs from a parallel universe every day, I peeled and ate that one too. This will probably get buried. When I was around 20, a few years ago, I kept having dreams about a woman with long black hair named Aurora, pronounced Aurora. They were different dreams, but for some reason, her distinct face and name always ended up in them. It got to the point where I would wake up frustrated and confused, trying to Google her name or find out how I was connected to her. After a few months she stopped showing up and I dismissed it, thinking my brain was just being a scumbag. Fast forward a few years later, Halloween 2009, I'm in the car with a friend stopped at a gas station. I'm about to pull out and merge onto a highway when I get a phone call from a random number, so I stop the car, but no one answered. There was a person behind me who grew impatient, honked at me, and then swerved in front of me instead of waiting for 2 seconds for me to move. Second they get on the highway, some silver Civic loses control of their wheel and crashes into the car that swerved in front of me. I called the cops and waited at the gas station for them to come. Turns out the drivers of both cars died. It 100% would have been me if I hadn't have got that phone call. Called it back a few hours later out of gratitude and curiosity, rang 3 times and went to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Aurora, please leave your name and number. Never had goosebumps like that in me life. Called it again the next day, because I was that confused about the whole situation. Some woman answers, we get to talking, I tell her my entire story including the dreams I had. She tells me she doesn't know how I got her number and that she never called me as far as she remembers. Weird. Ask her if she has a Facebook to confirm if she is in fact the woman in my dreams. Check her Facebook, holy fuck, it's her. If that's not a glitch in the Matrix, then I'm just batshit crazy. I've related this story before, but here goes. The parallel universe answering machine. This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, hey, it's me, Kill All Extremists. Sorry I missed you, call you later. Bye. And then I hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day he called back and he says, wow, that was quite a message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to? I was like, what are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl. Well, as it turns out the message didn't end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times. After my initial message that I did leave, as quoted above, there was a slight pause and it continues on for another 30 to 40 seconds or so with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had with a girl whose voice I didn't recognize. You could compare it to the message I know I did leave, and the two voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice but, talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that recorded the message to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and had analyzed, unfortunately. Also, neither I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky, I can't explain it. TL, doctor, I may have connected to an alternate universe through a telephone answering machine. As I was reading this, the lights went out in my room. It's definitely because I barely plugged in my lamp, but still freaked me right the fuck out. This is a creepy thread, man. Driving home on a storm day, I see that a side road up to the local golf course is blocked off by flashing barricades. I also spy a Mercedes parked past the barricades with its hazards on. I stop and walk up to the car to see if they need help. I'm an EMT, I shine my light in the back seat to see a man slumped over, apparently asleep. Thinking I've got a few drunks, I move up to the driver window and rap on the glass and shine my light in. The driver is sitting bolt upright, unmoving, staring straight ahead. My window wrapping or light doesn't cause him to blink, flinch or move. I look over and the passenger is slumped forward onto the dash. This begins to creep me out. I call down to the sheriff's station and request a code 2, no lights/sirens, unit up to my location to help me check them out. Doors are locked. While on the phone I walk back to my truck to get my go bag. As I'm on the phone with dispatch, she asks me to get a license number for the car just as a PG&E, power company, cherry picker truck comes rumbling down from up the closed road. I move to go around the truck to get the plate number, and the car is gone. I talked to the driver of the truck and he said there was a 80-foot tree down across the road, and that he didn't think it'd be open for a day or so. So the question is, the hell did the car go? Tree up one way, barricades down the other. It's kept me a bit unsettled when stopping at accidents/hazards since then. I can't help but imagine you as a small, throwaway character in some fantasy novel. The guy who checks to see if the main characters are okay, and then as he turns around they continue to be abducted or whatever it may be. I feel like I'm reading that sort of story from the perspective of a small character. It's cool. This is the first one I read that legitimately creeped me the FK out. I think something like this would scar me for life. That reminded me of when you get to a part of a video game that glitches and the characters never begin their scripted actions. It's a little unsettling then. I can't imagine real life. At a friend's place back in 2008. When we were all teenagers, we had a cool shed at a friend's that we'd hang out in every weekend. It had 4 sets of bunk beds, tables, a fireplace, TV, fridge, etc., the whole lot. One night we were all hanging out in there when I decided I needed a piss. I walked out the front door of the shed and started to walk to the right when I stopped. Now let me explain the layout here. As you walk out of the shed, his house is to the left and to the right is where we all parked our cars, further out you're left with empty fields and trees. It was dark by now, the lights from the house illuminating the space between the house and our cars, but trailing off just past them. As I took a step to the right, intending to go behind the cars to relieve myself, I saw my friend's older brother standing there. I watched him for a good 5 to 10 seconds as he stood there, facing into the darkness. He then proceeded to walk behind a couple trees and a car before he disappeared. Confused, I walked back into the shed and asked my friend what his brother was doing by the cars. The conversation went as follows: me, hey man, what's your brother doing by the cars? Him, what do you mean? Me, he just walked off behind the cars. Brother, I'm right here. I looked over and there his brother was, sitting down on one of the chairs with a drink. He was wearing the exact same clothes as I saw him in, and the only way to get into the shed was through the door that I was standing in the way of. To this day, I've no idea how it all happened. I'm guessing I was just seeing things, but the fact that I watched him walk around for a good 10 seconds has always puzzled me. I've never had anything else like that happen. Oh man, I have one of these that involves the Matrix. I got my wisdom teeth out in 2000, right around the time that the original Matrix came out on VHS. I was bummed completely out of my mind on Percocet after coming back from the surgery. I had awful wisdom teeth, and my mom basically just dropped me in bed and went and rented the movie for me because I'd never seen it in theaters. I remember being irritated that the sun through the window was making the TV glare but being too out of it to get up. A little bit after the black cat glitch in the Matrix scene, I passed out and apparently slept for about 8 hours. The tape in the VHS machine kept rewinding itself and playing over and over again. I woke up and the movie was at roughly the same spot as when I passed out, but it was completely dark outside. 0 time lapse for me. Completely lost my mind. Started freaking out and screaming because I thought I discovered the secret and somebody turned off the sun. I remember crying and trying to explain to my panicked family, who have never let me live it down. On a semi-related note, after her C-section my wife was on Ambien in the hospital. She wasn't entirely asleep and was talking to her mom about how much she hated the doctor that was in the room. She made her mom usher him out of the room. Her mom was a good sport and pretended to make the doctor leave even though he wasn't there. Drugs are a hell of a drug, man. I think the strangest glitch I've found was back when I was in high school. I was talking to a friend on the phone, describing a dream I had about an ice skating rink, and then he starts to describe the rest of the dream to me from the opposite point of view. It was a while ago so I don't remember everything, but we both described the scenery, what the people were doing, etc. It freaked me out when it happened. One time I spilled a bowl of SpaghettiOs, and as I was cleaning them, I noticed that one was on the ceiling. 9 feet up. I didn't even drop the bowl. I just tipped it over onto the counter by mistake. But sure enough, A single O was right there, stuck to the ceiling. Did they have cheese and tomato sauce, or just tomato sauce? Reddit is getting so meta that big threads are starting to reference itself. My dad had this little toy monkey that he used to call his favorite child and tease me and my siblings with it. Not in a bad way, but it was really frustrating to us and we spent hours trying to steal it from him. Well anyways, one day we finally got it and threw it into the garbage after drawing on it and mangling it for a bit. My dad laughed and searched for it a bit but basically figured we had thrown it out and gave up after a week or so. Anyways, a few years later, when I was about 17, I'm walking down the street in Toronto, I don't live in two, was just visiting friends, and see this little orange object on the side of the road. When I walk over to it, I pick it up and see that it was the exact same fucking monkey. It even had the black Sharpie lines on it from when we drew all over it. I honestly cannot even come up with the chances of that happening, especially considering our garbage is sent to a local dump and is nowhere near Toronto. Edit: I actually took it with me and killed it with fire just so I knew it wouldn't come back again. I had a friend in high school, let's call him Bob. Bob was a very nice fellow, and while we weren't that close, we had similar tastes in music and we'd share CDs. This is in the late 80s, way before file sharing. Anyway, we eventually graduated, and I moved several hundred miles away to college, and we lost touch. When I left for college, I had one of Bob's CDs still in my possession, Beat, by King Crimson. Fast forward 10 years. I'd graduated college and was knee-deep in my career, and finally saved up enough money and bought my first house. In the new house and while unpacking, I see the CD in a box, hadn't noticed it in many years, and thought, gee, I really should track down Bob and return this. Right then, the doorbell rings. It's Bob. And he says, hey, you wouldn't happen to still have my King Crimson CD, would you? I look down. I'm holding it in my hand. I hand it to him, and his mouth drops open, mine probably already is. We exchange pleasantries. I probably asked him how he found me, but I no longer remember. He eventually takes off. I haven't seen Bob since. I was walking through Best Buy one day a couple years ago and I walked past a rack of books. Sitting on the rack was the last book in the Dark Tower series from Stephen King. The front cover had the picture of Roland in front of the tower with the field of roses behind him. I held the damn book in my hand and looked it over. I remembered being puzzled about why it was in a Best Buy, but whatever. I'd read the first 6 and had been waiting for the last one, but my spending money was low that week. I set it down and decided to come back next week after I got paid to buy it. I went back next week and it wasn't there. It slipped my mind after that for a bit, but about a month later I went to B&M to get my copy. They told me it hadn't come out yet, the release date for the book was 6 months later. I pre-ordered it then. When the book actually came out I went to pick it up. I described the cover out loud to make sure I wasn't crazy. The clerk handed it to me and there it was exactly as I'd held it in Best Buy. Don't know what happened there, but it is a common market strategy before releasing books to test which cover appeals to the readers the most. The writer/cover artist come up with different covers and place them where the public would be able to view them. Then they track which cover/title grabs the attention of the buyer the most. As a reference, I remember reading about this technique on either Tim Ferriss' website or his book The 4-Hour Workweek. He used it to decide which title/name to give the book. I used to work in a building that had 3 levels of sub-basements, with the piece of lab equipment I typically worked on in the lowest basement. I had the only key. There was a wired phone in there, and I did work late some nights. But not this night. I was sleeping alone in my apartment when I woke up to a call on my cell phone from my girlfriend at 3 a.m. She was in hysterics and asking why I scared her. Apparently she received a call from that basement phone just a minute earlier, with someone who sounded like me slowly repeating her name, until crackling and fading out. My apartment was 10 miles away from work. I thought she was lying, but I saw the 3 a.m. call from the basement phone logged on her cell myself. Still freaks me the fuck out. Used to work in a building that had 3 levels of sub-basements, with the piece of lab equipment I typically worked on in the lowest basement. Raccoon City. My dad used to get up around 3 a.m. every morning for work. Starting at a very early age I would wake up on my own and wander downstairs to see him before he left. One morning when I was about 4 years old, I made it to the bottom of the stairs and noticed that the front door was ajar. I opened it up and saw my father in his favorite work shirt making his way down the driveway to his truck in his typical work outfit, plaid shirt and dickies. I swung the door open wide and yelled for him to come back for a hug before he left. He slowly turned around and just stared at me and started walking back towards the house. He was looking so strangely at me that it started to scare me and I began crying and asking what was wrong. Just as he had almost reached me, a pair of arms encircled me from behind in a bear hug. I turned my head to see my understandably freaked out father staring at his doppelganger, in the same outfit. The double took one look at my dad and ran down the driveway. Meanwhile, my dad yanked me in the house and locked the door. Weirdest morning ever. Never did quite figure that one out. I would not trust my 4-year-old memory of the event if it wasn't also witnessed by my father. He won't really talk about it these days, but my mom has since told me that he called out of work and she spent the day reassuring him he wasn't a nutcases. TL/Doctor, Dad and I met his equally freaked out doppelganger at 3 a.m. in our own driveway. I was in class one day, sitting in a group of 3 people including myself. We were talking and my friend dropped his pen on the desk. I saw it stall in midair for a second then drop on his desk. My friend asked, "Did anyone else see that?" All my friends saw it, and it was just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. To this day I have no explanation for it. My father died in 2008. A night before visiting his house for the last time, he appeared in my dream, where he handed to me a black camera in a plastic bag, and specifically said, "Take this camera, as I won't be needing it anymore," and I took it from him. First thing in the morning, I visit his house, where most of the stuff is already moved by my uncle, and open one of his wardrobes, find a sealed cardboard box deep inside, rip it open with a knife and take out his retro black camera. Apparently my uncle missed that one, and took off all his other electronics but the camera. All I can say is that, this experience was a proper communication and it significantly eased my pain, knowing that something remains after a loved one passes. Driving to work one day, stop at a red light. Look to my left, next to me at the light, beige 2007 Chevy Suburban. Look across the intersection, 2007 beige Chevy Suburban. Look at the traffic crossing, 2007 beige Chevy Suburbans, going through the intersection. Not so much a glitch in the Matrix moment as it was a stuck in Grand Theft Auto moment. Back when my husband and I first got together, we used to work opposite shifts. One day I was napping in our apartment before I went to work. As I was drifting off, I had this strange feeling like he was right there, laying with me. It was really comforting and warm, so I drifting right into a dream where we were napping together outside in the sun. I woke up about 30 minutes later, feeling totally refreshed. My phone vibrated with a text message from my husband. It said, "Just took a nap on my break. Thanks for joining me." Cool, huh? I decided to marry him in an effort to absorb his powers.